Welcome to Beyond Pipeline. We talk about how to win the inner game of sales. My name is John Habush, and I'm your host. And today we have a very special guest. He has one of the harder to pronounce names that I've ever come across, but more importantly, he's probably one of the best cold callers I've ever met, and is a very fun and good dude. Without further ado, Will Falkenborg, my man. How are you? I hope I got that somewhat right.
Dude, I'm doing wonderful, man. I'm living the dream. How are you doing?
You're living in, oh, dude, I'm solid. I'm very grateful that we get to do this. Um, let's kind of dive right into it. Let's just start here. What got you into sales?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like with sales, like nobody ever is like, oh, I'm gonna be in sales, right? Like when you're a kid, you always want to be like an astronaut, like a Hugh Hefner, like one of those things. That's kind of like
You
the two
have
options if you're in
was
like
that
first
your
grade.
dream?
Yeah, yeah. But I mean, either way, it's like I think most people fall into it, right? It's like, okay, you have a need for something, you have to perform and you have to make money. And so typically sales is like the fastest path to actually do that without spending 8 to 10 years, like getting like a medical degree, right? And so like kind of like how I got into it is I met my wife at San Diego State. And then after college, like she was pregnant and we were expecting a kid. I spent like days sending hundreds of job applications, got absolutely nowhere. Um, I even had I even got declined for being a host at a restaurant for making $22 an hour as a wealth planner because I had a finance degree. I thought I was going to do something with that. Little did I know, like my finance degree would mean absolutely nothing to me. And then one day I was looking through like the job applications and I kept seeing this like three-letter word like pop up, right? It's like typically when you see a three-letter word, you're like, oh shoot, it's the IRS, it's the SEC, like I've done something wrong. But kept thinking this three-letter word called like SDR pop up. I was like, oh, what is that? Like it doesn't seem like legit. It almost felt like a scam. Because like apparently you can make six figures in your first year if you do it well. I was like, there's no way you can do that. Nobody does that out of college, right? So I actually started applying to these roles like with a little bit of a smaller pay range around the 60 to 70 OT spot. They wouldn't like consider me for even like an SDR intern spot, like doing manual data entry for the SDR team because like I had no experience. I couldn't use Salesforce. And actually got turned down a lot of times. And so how I got into sales in the summer, I don't want to go on a huge tangent here, was I applied for the last company I worked at after being told it's like twice that people felt like they didn't have what it took to be as an SDR. Applied to the last company where I worked, HG Insights. It's where I actually started as an SDR. And in that interview, I was just tired of it. Like baby was coming in 4 months. I was like, this has to be the one I get, or else I don't know what I'm gonna do. And so the pressure of that was just like compounding over time. And I was getting more and more stressed every day. I wasn't able to sleep. I would just be angry all the time. And so I went into that interview with a lot of fear, which I guess is like fear is like an indicator for like heightened awareness. And I spent hours just researching the company beforehand because of all this anxiety, like knowing what they do, all of their case studies, like who they sold to, who their customers are. And so after I had like my first initial meetings and I went in office, like I sat down and one of the sales leaders there, his name is Tyler, he asked me, he's like, okay, well, what does Champify do? Little did he know, like before he walked in there, he was 5 minutes late, and I was just sitting there nervous, like sweating through my t-shirt. I actually went up to the whiteboard and I just wrote out everything we did, like who we sell to, our each product line, and I just mapped out my entire thought process on the whiteboard. And so taking it forward to him, he says, "What do we do?" I was like, "Oh, that's a great question. If you turn around, they'll show you." And I got up and walked to the whiteboard, and I saw his eyes just light up. And I was like, at that moment, I was like, "Oh, this is it." Like all of that actually all that effort and work and put in, I felt like paid off right then before the interview was done. Yeah, that's how I got into sales.
Dude, I love the resilience you had. It sounds like you faced a lot of failure trying just to get into sales. And how did what was that experience like for you? Just like you had a kid on the way, you experienced a lot of failure. Like, yeah, can
Hmm.
you help us understand like what that felt like for you?
Yeah, I mean it's not really a good feeling, right? It's like thinking of the fact that hey, you're gonna have a kid and you have no money in the bank account. It's like first of all, how are you gonna pay for the kid? A lot of people say like, hey, money isn't everything. Either the only people who really say that are people with a lot of money or yeah, people with a lot of money are people just born with it, I feel like, because at that point it's like money became the thing that granted like life or like the ability to pay for the ability to have it. And so that was pretty frustrating. And I kind of funneled that into feeling almost like I wasn't good enough, right? It's like, hey, I have this bachelor's degree. Like everyone in my life told me is like, hey, you have to go to college, you have to do this, and you'll be set. And I thought I was just going to get a job after college, right? I didn't know you actually
Yeah.
had to do something about it. And so how it felt was like it just sucked. Like I mentioned earlier, I was just pissed off all the time. I'd be short in my interactions. Like, um, in retrospect, I put the blame more on myself instead of like how I could change that to get a job. And so just spent a lot of the time just putting myself down instead of actually putting that effort into funneling it into actually getting the job.
Yeah, it sounds like yeah, you almost had to like switch your self-talk of doing and dealing with some of the failure from, I suck to what could I do better?
Exactly.
Was there a moment that you realized that, or did you have to, realize that in retrospect?
Yeah, I mean, it was, I think, mm, moment I realized that was an S was a probably with I alluded to earlier, like two things. Was one, I was frustrated over it. I said, this is the last time. Like I have to finish it. This has to be like the interview I get. I'd say it was that moment, and then took a interview with an SDR manager at a cybersecurity company. And in that meeting, he kept like drilling me all these questions. Basically, he's like, "Hey, I feel like it seems like it almost feels like you don't have what it takes based off like what I'm hearing, right?" And that to me just like crushed me. I was like, dude, I'm literally telling you, I'm going to be your top performer. I'm going to make more calls than anyone else. I'll do whatever more than anyone else. It doesn't matter what the KPI is, I'll do it.
Hmm.
And then I felt like a lot of people took what I said and didn't believe it for what I said. They couldn't like understand like the why behind why I was doing it, right? Um, and I think that and the oh shoot, this is the last time I have to take an interview. I need to finish it now. That was the turning point for me. I think what law was it? It's like you finish something depending on the amount of time you allot yourself to finish it.
Hmm.
I don't remember
Yeah.
that you've probably heard of that, but
Yeah,
I
I've heard
think
of that.
that really does come into play. And that ended up being like the biggest tipping point for me.
Yeah, what did you tell yourself during that time to get yourself to keep moving, keep going through it? And the context is, I think a lot of people just struggle with failure, struggle with continually showing up, whether it's on cold calls or just showing up to their job day to day with like with amount of energy needed to keep moving. Like, what did you tell yourself to keep going?
In the interview process.
Yeah.
It was more like, okay, um, so I realized, and it took me a lot of like brain processing to figure this out, but when a woman is pregnant, it's almost like a countdown timer, right? And so that timer is counting down day by day by day into the due date. And so there's only a allotted amount of time that you have to actually do something. And so the thing I kept telling myself, and I was like, oh, only 121 more days. Oh, only 120 more days. It's like I have to kind of get this done before then, you know? And so that was also kind of a constant reminder, but not everyone else has a human alarm.
Yeah, which is wild the amount of, I'd imagine the amount of like pressure you felt to go and like handle that. I mean, dude, that's like that is insane. How'd you handle the pressure of being a dad that young?
Hmm. I mean, okay, that's an interesting question because if you asked that question 30 years ago, it would be like that young wouldn't be the question, right? I feel like in
That's
today's
fair.
society is the only society where it's like normalized to not have kids young. I feel like it's not like I had to deal with it, right? I feel like having kids young after, for example, after you have a job and you have a kid, first of all, your money aspect is handled. Sorry, my kid's trying to attack a
Okay.
cat right now. And
That's
so you have the
amazing.
money aspect handled. So that's not like the biggest pressure at the moment, right? And so that took a large load off because like once I got that first like $6,000-7,000 like paycheck in, I was like, okay, rent's paid for, I'm good.
You're
Now I can
good.
just wait
Yeah.
till the next month. And so in terms of how I didn't handle it, I think it just more motivated me than anything else. Like a lot of people's whys are surrounded like, hey, I need to make more money so I can buy a house. I can look good and keep up with everyone else on this facade they put out on social media and all these
Yeah.
highlight reels. It's like, hey, my buddy's dad has a boat. My buddy gets to go to Switzerland in the winter times. It's like great, but like who cares? At the end of the day, it's like I feel like my why shifted from myself to someone else, right? Like before I ever had a job or before I had the need to get a job, I was just lazy. Like I never had a job in college. I'd just sit around, I'd go surf, I'd go play volleyball. Like that was what I did all day. But once that happened in my why, I'd say my why shifted somewhere
Mhm.
else. Um, it was more of a motivating factor than anything. Like if it was 5 p.m., I'd still be calling. Like used to call into Asia Pacific. So I'd sometimes be calling to 6 p.m. I'd be making cold calls. Um, the work putting in is it's not like I had to motivate myself to do it because I wasn't doing it for myself.
Yeah. Interesting. So it sounds like your why evolved from you to your family.
Yeah, I feel like I should just ask you that question. You said a lot better than me.
Dude, yeah. I mean, it's just like it's easy for me to distill stuff because you just like you listen to people talk, you're like, okay, I get it, that makes sense. Like what I think a lot of people struggle to find what motivates them, and like even if they have like some innate talent or skill or whatever it is, they struggle to find what motivates them. Like, how do you? And maybe again, you could throw it back on me if you don't have any problem. Like, how do you think about like finding something to motivate yourself? Like, what do you do when
Yeah,
you're not motivated and you don't want to call on a Friday? I saw a post from you
yeah.
recently where it's like I didn't feel well and it was 2 p.m. and I wanted to quit, but I kept going. Like,
hmm
what do you do to re-motivate yourself?
Yeah. I think there's three things that like motivate you the most, right? Like the first one that we already spoke about was like if your why shifted outside of yourself. But like I think the second biggest indicator is proving someone wrong, right?
Dude,
And
yeah.
so it's like if you make a bet with someone, or like for example, like I had a one time I was like really sick and I only had 2 or 3 meetings on the week. And it was like a Friday. I told my CEO, I was like, hey, if I don't book 2 meetings by 12 p.m., I'm doing 100 push-ups. And he's like, hey, if you book 2 meetings by 12 p.m., I'll do 100 push-ups. And so just like proving someone wrong or almost like winning something, like gamifies it
Yeah.
to the point where like I literally booked 2 meetings in 30 minutes that day. It was like crazy
Unreal.
because I was just like, wait, like how can I drive urgency to this one person? Like just call this person on my phone. I'd say that is a huge I guess aspect of motivation. But I think the third piece is like how do you remembered, right? And so sometimes when it's like 2 p.m., 3 p.m., it's like I guess the thought of my son remembering his dad as someone who couldn't cold call till 5 p.m. like haunts me, right? It's like, do you want to be remembered as someone who doesn't dial, right?
Dude, yeah.
Um, so I'd say that's really big, but I'd be curious to hear like, yeah, what does that look like? What does that look like for you?
I'd say it's very similar, and I had to learn how to motivate myself over time. It wasn't something that was necessarily easy or something that was it was more of a skill to be learned. But I'd say candidly it
Mm,
was a lot of the same issues or it was a lot of the same journey that you experienced of, being able to one just understand how do I motivate myself and use past experiences that I've had to fuel myself. Like I feel like sometimes people try to avoid digging into challenges from their past, and
mm,
I actually use that to fuel me, right? So people are like, oh, like, don't be angry. And I'm like, I use some of the anger that I had about my circumstance or my past, whatever it was, to actually fuel me. Although not a
mm,
great long-term fuel source, it gets you off the ground. And then two is
mm,
again going back to what you said, dude. It's like, who do you want to become? Like what do you want to be
mm,
remembered for? One of the things I tell myself in really hard days is like, what type of person am I becoming for my future wife and kids and family? Because like the extent to which I push myself is the extent to which the quality of life that they're going to have, right? So I think it's very similar to you, but it's
mm,
understanding those levers for myself
mm.
and then being able to move forward.
Dude, I love that. I was listening to a podcast from one of my buddies' his name's Colby Haverkamp. And on that podcast, his guest said, sometimes when she's talking about motivation, etc., she's like, Am I planting the seeds that are gonna grow and my kids are gonna be able to sit under one day? Am I planting the seeds for the trees that my kids are gonna be able to sit under one day?
Yeah.
And I was just like, holy moly. Like think about it, like the days you slack off, the day like that's not a seed your kids gonna sit under and like that doesn't grow into those trees, right?
Yeah.
That is a huge thing that kind of aligns with what you just said. one thing that you said stuck out to me, and I don't want, I don't want to grill you this whole time,
No, you're
but
good, dude.
you
Let's have some
mentioned
fun.
you'll use like the I guess challenges that made you angry in the past to fuel what you're doing right now.
Yeah.
What are the things that made you angry and the challenges in the past you're referring to?
Yeah, man. No, I like the reverse interviews. It's fun. Um, again, I think a lot of people grow up with challenges, right? And I'll kind
Mhm.
of keep it general just to protect some privacy. But just like anyone, like there are folks in my family that really struggled, and then those challenges, you really face some hard times, emotionally from things that through the consequences of their actions, you struggle financially, right? So you grow up in an environment where for a prolonged period of
Mhm.
time, you have to do things that really adults have to go and take care of. And I was working from an early age. I worked with Mexican immigrants on Saturday mornings in the back of a bakery. So you kind of develop a chip on your shoulder because although I was fortunate, I was born in the United States and I have a lot of the privileges that come with that. A lot of the stuff too was not given. It was earned, and so you had that chip on your shoulder, um, because that's just what right? So I use that to move forward, because like in essence, all I can say is this: it's like I knew the life I didn't want, and so whenever I don't want to do something, I think about that and I go, "Am I going to allow myself to have that life?" And then
Mm,
I move forward, right? So it's using
mm,
whatever pain that you're given to move forward. And like that's actually how I use it. But I try to do that in tandem with, again, like doing this podcast. What can I do to help people so that hopefully if they listen to this, like they'll take something from this conversation we're having right now, and it'll make them into a better human so they don't have to experience the challenges that maybe I did or someone similar did, right? And that we can just learn from each other. Right. So it's a little bit of both. It's a
I
little bit of
love
both, like
that.
the pain of the past and also like the moving forward towards the future. Um, yeah, have you ever had thinking about motivation? Is there anything that any experience or any past challenge that you've had that you really struggle with or struggled with that really pushes you today? I know obviously having kids and things like that, but is there anything else that you can think of that um really pushes you, or maybe a struggle you had that really helped you develop your competitive spirit?
Hmm. It is a great question. I think it's not like a specific incident or event, but like I feel like I've always struggled with being great at something.
Okay,
Like
tell me more.
I feel like I've always been average. Like no matter what it was, if it was like handball at recess in school or literally anything, math, any subject you could ever think of, going for a run, track, football, basketball, I was always like average, maybe like almost good at best. And so like one thing I was like I always dealt with, just not dealing with, maybe it's a lack of like my own lack of worth ethic because I think as a kid, but it was just like why am I not like great at anything, right? I had all these friends who were like super good at like Legos, like building Legos, like they're super good at Roblox or insanely good at football or like the fastest person in school. But I'm like, these people are great at something, and obviously it takes a lot of work to do it. I felt like I did put a lot of work into a lot of things I did, but one thing always struggled with is like I feel like I'm not great at anything, no matter like how much I put in.
Hmm.
And so like I guess when I started out cold calling, is like the first day I did it, I just like I felt like this is it. This is something I could like if I put everything into it,
Yeah.
I could. Like I'm not like by no means am I great at it, right? Like in your intro, it was very like flattering, right? But it's like even like I'd say I'm really good, like 55 to 60 some percent of the time, but the other 30%, like, dude, that's so bad. Like I'll make so many mistakes, but then I'll leverage those mistakes to make that percentage of good even bigger. But I'd say like, okay, to answer your question, sum it up. The thing that's like affected me a lot is just like thinking like, hey, am I great enough? Am I good enough to be great?
Hmm.
Because I haven't felt like I was great at anything. It's just being so hypercritical of yourself. Like I'm doing AE
Yeah.
training right now, and I'll run back a demo. I'll finish up a call with my CEO, and I'm like, dude, that was so bad. Like I was so nervous. I stuttered in the conversation, and my CEO was like, dude, that was great. And I walk it back, and I didn't even stutter at all. Like I didn't even sound nervous. I sounded extremely confident, but in my mind, I'm like, I'm pooping my pants, dude. I'm like, someone needs to come change my diaper, or I'm gonna leak.
Yeah.
Um, and so it's like it's just how to not be so like so hypercritical of yourself on everything, and like say like,
Yeah.
hey, you can do this, just like you are good at it. Just like you sound like you're good. I gotta stop thinking you're not, you know?
Yeah, how do you deal with that self-criticism when it's really high? Like I feel like some people have moments where self-criticism is just really high. Like how do you deal
Mm.
with that? Because I don't think it's necessarily always bad either, but it's like how do you deal with that and make it something that's productive? Maybe you're still working on it, that's fine, but how are you trying to deal with that?
Okay, well, I'll like analyze it, right? It's like, okay, is my self-criticism warranted? Am I doing a horrible job at it? Like based off of like what standards look like, right? Like for example, I thought I did horrible today on the phones. Like I'm trying out a new script. I was told I sounded scripted, which makes sense. Like I'm trying a new script, it's probably not going to work, but that's how you understand and tweak it, right? And I spent and I just felt like for an hour after, I was like, dude, I freaking suck today. And then I started getting back in the zone a little bit. And I look back, like, I have 3 demos on the board today, all with like really great titles. And like, why am I like at 3 demos in a day is good any day you're doing it, right? It's like, why am I being so hypercritical of myself? And it's like, I guess this isn't the best answer, but I was just like, dude, stop. Like, that's not what
Yeah.
you want to hear. It's like, if you're starving in a third world country and you're thirsty and have no water, you don't want to hear someone say, hey, just drink water. Like, doesn't make sense. But it's just like,
Yeah.
I think it's realizing where you actually are versus where you think you are. And then
Yeah.
it just trying to be like, dude, this is so unwarranted. I'm doing really well and just changing the way you're thinking about it.
Dude, I've experienced something similar too, where I'll think, man, that call sucked. And I'll go back on Gong and listen to it. And I'm like, oh, you know what? That wasn't so bad. Um,
Yeah.
Dude, yeah, I wonder like where that comes from. You know, like where do you think that that comes from for you? That high level of I don't want to like label you high level of self-criticism, but like using your words, like where do you think that that criticism comes from? Like what is that?
I
What
think
is
it
the
was,
genesis of that?
yeah, like the first book in the Bible or,
No, no, no. Yeah, no, Genesis as in like
oh,
what do you think causes you to have a high level of self-criticism?
I just think I feel like it's that like it's like expectations, right? It's like, oh, like I'm not the best SDR, but so many people like, oh, you're so good at this. I'm like, dude, I'm like I'd say I'm decent at it, but I'm not like the best, right? But I feel like sometimes I feel like there's an expectation set on me, or like, hey, I've never been great at something. I feel like I might be almost getting there for this. Like I have to get there, right? It's so thinking of like your future state compared to your present state and the delta between that and wondering why you haven't filled that yet. And so I think it's more of like, oh, I'm not where I want to be. Um, and that's primarily what causes that. I don't know. Is that something
No.
you've ever run
Yeah,
into?
yeah,
And
yeah, yeah, yeah. That's what I was getting to is also just like having more patience for the outcome itself, right? It's just like having
mm,
more patience, learn to have patience. How do you, I think a lot of people struggle with this too, of just like with quota or making cold calls or just getting better at a skill, like the struggle to have patience. Like, how do you get yourself to have the patience to keep showing up? Because I feel like people really struggle with
mm,
that, especially in the SDR world, dude. I mean, people get obliterated
yeah.
by it.
I think it's just like not being afraid to fail and just like falling on your face willingly, right? It's like I
Yeah.
think like growth is like just being like super audacious and you're like willing to fail and fall on your face and then like kind of adjusting from there, right? And so like for example on a cold call this morning, oh God, dude, voice crack.
I love this interview, dude. This is amazing. I love this.
I had a cold call this morning with this guy named Will at a cybersecurity company. Dude, this guy like dude, this is like one of my favorite calls because like one, this was my first call of the day. I introed it so poorly. My tonality was completely off. I was like grabbing my kid mid call. So I was like, it was this. And so, but he took the time to tell me why my call wasn't good, right? Like I wasn't afraid to fail. I wasn't nervous on the phone, but he
Mhm.
took the time to give me like really great feedback. And then a lot of that feedback involved like, hey, you should tweak your script. Don't like cut the fluff from the beginning, focus on the problems that I would be solving as like a leader. And I was just like, why am I not doing that? And so not being afraid to fail and then asking people for feedback or just being readily available for it, I think is like the one of the biggest things to like getting better at something. Cause like I'm only gonna use that guy's feedback to go like call his boss or like to go call someone and make myself more money. So like
Yeah.
that guy took 20 minutes out of his day, that's gonna save me hours of my life. And so I would, and like a lot of people are trying to get good at something too. Is like they're so scared of feedback. Like if their
Yeah.
SDR leader or their sales leader says like, "Hey, you did really poorly on this," they're like extremely offended instead of like owning up to it and saying, taking ownership and saying, hey, you're right, I was bad at it. What did I do wrong about it? How can I fix it? Like that's something
Yeah.
that a lot of people shun from. So I think not like leaning into the wind of feedback essentially opens your sails for growth. Dude, that was sick.
That was
I'm gonna
sick.
put that on a
That
I'm gonna put
was
that
that
on,
was
yeah.
very
Dude,
poetic. I
I'm
should
gonna put
pay
that on a
you.
t-shirt.
You should put that
Yeah.
on a t-shirt. What how do you think people can get better at taking feedback? Because I agree with you, dude. I think a lot of people are just really afraid of feedback. And I think if
Hmm.
someone's listening to this and they're like, oh, I really struggle with feedback, and we just tell them like, hey, get better at it. Like it's not like it's
Hmm.
helpful because it's kind of the only
Yeah.
thing, but like if you had to give advice to someone who struggles with feedback, like what would you recommend that they do?
Okay, two things. Two things. Let's say you're in a cold call review or whatever review with your boss, and they start like giving like, hey, well, here's what a lot. First of all, a lot of leaders will say like, hey, what do you think you did wrong first to give you chances to acknowledge it, right? But if you feel like someone is giving you feedback or constructive criticism, and you feel yourself starting to like your anxiety to build, you're starting to feel like, oh, I don't like this hard conversation. Like you have to acknowledge that, and then I think come to the realization it's like, okay, this feeling I'm having is because I know I messed up, but my leader is here not to point out my wrongdoings. It's to help me fix them so I don't make that mistake over and over again. So I think
Yeah.
it's acknowledging, in my opinion, it's acknowledging that you have that feeling and then letting it go. It's kind of like in meditation, right? It's like when you're only thinking of like
Yeah.
when you're trying to like, retain your focus on one thing and you feel another thought coming through, you internalize that thought and just let it go. I think that would be very similar to getting constructive criticism because it does make a lot of people anxious. So that would be the first is like, hey, realizing that that is you are feeling that way, even
Yeah.
maybe even communicate it and then ask for feedback as well. Like if you're consistently asking for feedback, it's gonna like it's almost like exposure therapy, right? You want to be open to it. It indicates you're open to it, and more people are more readily able to give it to you.
Yeah, I like the thought too about just getting exposure because that was going to be my overall piece of advice if I someone asked me, be like, hey, just like kind of gotta get exposure because dude, like I used to stutter a lot during grade school, a little better in high school,
Mm,
still bad in college, and like the only way I really got better is like through practicing in the mirror, talking, and then just going and talking like to people, right? And that's the only way you get better. There's no really no other
mhm.
way. You can't read a book on how to not stutter. I mean, you could, but
Yeah.
like, there's no real way. So you can't really read a book on cold calling. It'll help a little bit, but not really. Um, let's keep pulling on this thread. Like, obviously, again, you're being humble. You've like you become quite a good SDR, candidly. Like, you really have a good process. You're really creative, but you also know the fundamentals. Like, how have you had to change from when you started to now in order to like get to where you are? Because like you're very well known in the
Mm,
sales community as a very good SDR. My gut says you probably are one of the best cold callers out there. Like, what have you had to change about yourself in order to
mm.
get to where you are today?
I feel like I got two answers. One is I haven't changed myself in any way. Like when I always like stuck to the script, blah blah blah. But I started as an SDR, which did me really well, right? But a lot of the times, like even with the script I started today, is like I feel like you're reading from a script, you're not being yourself, right? And so like once I had the fundamental skeleton layout of the script, I could just go wild, wild west and flow with it and
Yeah,
be myself. And so one thing that's like I feel like has made me decent SDR is like just always being myself no matter what. Because I think people thrive for like human, like authentic connection, right? So if I'm on the phones, like, and this is why I got torn apart this morning. If I'm just reading from a script to try it out, it's like it's not me talking, it's the script talking, right?
hmm,
And so like not being afraid to like just be yourself, throw in not quirky jerks, awkward. Throw in like quirky jokes, right? It's
yeah,
like, dude, make a joke if you want. Like I do something I've been doing on the phone a lot today when I'm explaining like Champify is like, oh, have you ever heard of the art of war? She was like, what? And it's like, oh yeah, like it was actually Sun Tzu who said that XYZ about Champify. I don't like, does that ring a bell? Like, don't say something like so far out of left field. It's like a large pattern interrupt because like that's just something I do. It's like it's fun and messing around and being playful and I think people like when you're being yourself. Like people can smell
yeah,
it when you're not being yourself, and then that really turns them away. But at the end of the day, if someone hates you for not being yourself, like, do you really want to book a meeting with them? It's like, yeah, maybe you might get paid for it, but like, do you really want to keep talking to them? And so I
yeah,
think being yourself like allows you to more authentically connect with people in general, which essentially makes them more receptive to understanding what their pains are, understanding if you can actually help them. I think I said I had two answers for you, but I don't remember. Oh, and I guess the second one is more on like my focus on my account strategy, but we can dive into that later if you want.
Yeah, let's stick on being yourself first for now. Although your account strategy is I also am curious. But what do you think makes it? I think feel like everyone talks about being authentic and like, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm all for it, by the way. I feel like it needs to be better defined, but I'm all for it in the way that
Mm-hmm.
I would define it. But like what do you think makes it hard for people to be themselves, quote unquote, and to really like
Um,
let themselves have their have the permission to go do that? Like what do you think makes it hard for people? Because I mean, I think people really do struggle with that.
I think it's like people feel like they're under the umbrella of their company's logo, right? It's
Dude, yeah.
like I don't see myself as like I'm like I'm not Champify. Like dude, I'm wearing my last company's t-shirt right now. Like I'm not HG Insights, I'm not Champify, I'm not any company. Like, yes, my values align with that company and I want to perform for them to get them better because I will also make money and grow with them. But it's like realizing, hey, you are not your company doesn't own you. And so if they do, if they think they own you, you should probably be working for a different company, right? And so I think like the way you can authentically be yourself is like by okay, so your question was why do people feel like they can't? Yeah, it's that in terms of being on the umbrella of their logo and then their expectations for their managers, right? Like some people feel like the managers want them to be like a cold calling machine. Some of them want them to be a
Yeah.
personalized email machine. It's like, how are you supposed to be yourself if you're taking on these like unrealistic expectations from other people to behave or perform a certain way that's not aligned to how you do it. Like artists paint in different ways, right? Like comedians have different styles of comedy for a reason. And that's because some people do things better in different ways. So people aren't authentically themselves when there's like a mold set for them. And they instead of them growing into that mold and that becomes the mold. You know,
Yeah.
like if I started football practice and I made my mouth guard in the boiling water and I gave it to you, it'd probably fit weird, right? You should boil your own mouth guard and fit it into your mouth yourself because that's who you're going to become. That's John Bush,
Yeah.
right? That's not anyone else.
Yeah. How do you think people should be more authentic, or what are some ways they can take small steps? Because I agree with you, dude. I like that thought process a lot. I think it's a big thing for people to have to jump and really yeah, almost like jump across the river and really go do that. Like what are
Mm.
some small ways you think people can do, especially if they do have let's go to being an SDR, especially if they do have a manager that is micromanaging you. Like what are some ways you'd recommend people be themselves in their day-to-day work?
Well, okay, first of all, before I jump into that, if you have a manager that's micromanaging you, you have to either tell them that, tell their boss that, or get out. Like it's not worth it being micromanaged. It never will be in your life. And so, fuck, what was the question? One more time. I started
Yeah,
going on a
no, no,
huge.
no. It's totally cool. It's how do you recommend people like start the process of being more
Mm,
authentic in a day
okay.
in their day-to-day job, specifically, whether an AE or an SDR, like what do you recommend that they start doing in order to do
Mhm.
that?
Yeah. And so to be yourself, a lot of people aren't themselves because of a filter they feel like is set on them. And so the way you can authentically quote unquote be yourself is removing that filter to some extent, right?
Yeah,
Like I'm gonna talk the way I'm gonna talk. I don't necessarily care about heavy business acumen. That's not my job as an SDR. My job is to connect with someone as a human, and the only way I can do that is by being yourself, right? But how do you be yourself? It's just like you have a life outside of work, talk in a similar fashion, talk in a similar tone, talk about what interests you, right? If my kid is crying in the background, I'm probably going to acknowledge it and then go pick him up and say, "Hey, give me a second. Like, I gotta get him." Like, my kid was stuck in an airplane and crying. I'm like, "Can you just give me 5 seconds? I gotta get my kid out of here." Just like being myself, because like that's
yeah,
like I'm not gonna go for a set filter and just try to book the meeting and then get my kid like crying, right? And I think people like it when you're yourself, man. It's like it is kind of hard to say like how do you be yourself more because it's like saying how do you drink water, John? It's just by drinking it, right? It's like you can do it a few ways. You can do it through a straw, you can drink it through a cup. Like you can just be yourself. But if you don't have like a sense of self-identity, I guess it's kind of hard to do that. But
yeah. I
um,
think it's more people having feeling like they have the permission to or the safety, let's call it, to
mm,
be themselves. Which I don't. The word safety is probably a little bit too like politically correct. I don't know if I like that, but yeah, well, let's call it safety. Like the people feel like they have the safety to go and be themselves, like do their own
Mm,
script or do their own emails or just kind of show up in a funny way, which I think that you do really well, not only in your job but on LinkedIn and things like that. I think people really struggle with that. Um, yeah, I think it's an important thing to talk about. Let's kind of shift if you're cool with it. Let's shift topics here a little bit. I getting to know you a little bit more and just like talking like off camera and things like that. Like I feel like you do a really good job of like hustling and working hard, but also like having fun. Like, what is your
mm,
perspective on like work life? Let's call it work life balance because that's what everyone understands. Like, what is your perspective on work life balance, and how do you get yourself to show up with a sense of enthusiasm, each day when you're doing your thing?
mm. Okay, so work-life balance isn't balancing time in and it's outside of work.
Yeah.
Okay, I mean, I think it's great. I don't really do it well. Like the way like kind of my day is structured, I do it somewhat well, I think. Like I don't start usually don't start working until my kiddo's up and about. And so he usually sleeps until around 7 a.m. Pacific. And if my wife's still asleep, like I'm still on baby duty, right?
Hmm.
And so I think it's like, hey, I'm not calling right up in the morning. Like maybe I'll answer a few emails on my phone, et cetera, but that's only because my kid's asleep, right?
Hmm.
And then during the workday, like one of the greatest things about working remote is I still get to help out. And so like I'll help make a bottle, help with the kid to sleep. I usually change like 3 diapers during the day, like very full diapers during the day. And like in terms of work-life balance is like I have a lot to improve on, but I think it's just like setting aside the time for that and trying your best to not let them intertwine, which I can't say I do well, but I'm working on it to the best of my ability at the moment.
Dude, I don't know how you balance being a dad and doing what you're doing right now. I just like it's so impressive. Like, yeah, what do you tell yourself when you're changing a diaper when you're in the middle of like a cold call, blitz or something? Like, dude, it's wild.
Okay, well, when I'm changing a diaper, I'm just focused on the smell. I'm like, dude, that's last night's bell peppers were bad, dude.
Oh my God.
But in terms of on a call, like I don't know, dude. I don't really think much about my kids when I'm on a call. Like I just think, and let me take a step back because it's like when people are thinking about like, oh, the SDR world is so hard to do, it's because I feel like they're not spending their time doing the right things, right? And so I've always loved just like talking to people, right? Like whether it was like sneaking into movie theaters or sneaking into a random jacuzzi and talking to random people for hours, right? It's like the only way I can do that is by cold calling. And so when I'm on the phone, I'm just thinking like, okay, how can I talk to this person? And that like fires me up. Just like literally just talking to someone. It doesn't matter if they're the wrong person. I can at least have a like
Interesting.
genuine conversation with them. And so I feel like I don't have to get myself like I don't have to get myself enthused, but because I'm going into these conversations with that mentality, it's like it enthuses me, right? And then because of that, it's like, have you ever heard of like the hedgehog principle with Jim Collins, Good to Great? Have you heard of Jim Collins?
Tell me more about. I do know who Jim
Okay.
Collins is.
And so like kind of like the hedgehog principle is essentially around like it's like the three circles kind of like this, right? I don't know if you can see this wall,
Yep, I
but
can see it.
it's like what like this circle's like what makes you extremely happy, right?
Yep,
What drives your economic engine? What can you make the most money from? And it's like
yep,
what can you like be the best at?
yep.
Right? And so for me, it's like, what do I have most fun doing? Talking to people and having conversations and then cold calling. What drives my economic engine? There's no other way to book a faster meeting than on a
And cold
cold call.
calling. Yeah.
I don't care who you are, you're wrong. Cold calling, that fits it. What can I be the best at? I use like with a cold call, it is the fastest feedback loop you will ever get in
Dude,
terms of
yes.
improvement. That being said, cold calling fits all three of these.
Yeah.
That being like, and so that is why I spend most of my time doing that, and I place the most emphasis and priority on cold calling is because it fits that and gives you the most return.
I like that. So it's what you're good at, what you can make money off of, and what was the third thing?
Yeah, so what you have a lot of fun doing, like what
A
you
lot of
get
fun
a lot of
doing.
pleasure from, what drives your economic engine, what can you make a lot of money at, and then what can you get really good at, or what are you the best at?
Got it. From a skill
It's
set
not
perspective.
necessarily the act of cold calling. It could be like, hey, maybe you're naturally quote unquote funny or charismatic individual and you love talking to people and striking up conversations at the store. Like, yeah, you could be
Dude,
an
I like
introvert
that
and be really
framework.
good at it.
I
Yeah.
like that.
It's not mine.
Yeah, yeah,
Hedgehog
yeah.
principle.
But I think a lot of people could operationalize that, right? Is like, how do you operationalize
Mhm,
that? Look at what you're good at or naturally inclined to, what you can make money from, and just somehow combine that into a skill set that you
mhm,
can practice every single
mhm.
day.
And so
Um,
think about it though, like some people could like they love being on camera. They can make really good videos for their prospects and like really drive the value home. Some people could
yeah,
like be cold email wizards. Like there's so many different applications of it. People just don't take it.
dude, yeah, I like your frame on this. So just like, because it all comes back to your ethos of like being yourself. How do you be
Mm,
yourself when doing things, and then you'll have intrinsic motivation to go and do them. I think like that is a really powerful, um, that's a very powerful frame with which to look at things because then it makes everything else easier when you can understand how you're driven intrinsically. I'm reading a book right now called Drive by Daniel Pink. Like he's essentially like, I'll save you the read. Essentially, he's like, hey, like find out what intrinsically motivates you because the carrots and the sticks are not as effective as everyone thinks. And so like I haven't finished it, but I can kind of tell that's the ethos of the book. And for me, I'm kind of like, duh, like
mm.
how do you like get your value? How do you understand your values and what you enjoy doing and what you're good at? And then how do you just follow that and do it? Um, yeah, I just think that is so important. This question popped up for me, so I want to ask you, how do you get clarity on what's important to you? Like, what do you do when you're feeling a little bit maybe like lost or confused or like things are kind of getting a little bit crazy or you still want to be dad for a second? Like, how do you get clarity and come back to center? Do you meditate? Do you journal? Do you watch a show? Do you
Mm.
work out, surf? Like, what do you do?
Yeah. Well, I used to surf a lot. I used to like work out in terms of volleyball. I don't really have the time. That sounds like an excuse, but if you have two kids under two, you'll understand you don't really have the time to go surf. Um, I think my biggest outlet, like that fills my cup back up, is like I think it's like stand-up comedy is like the only thing I love doing besides like cold
You do
calling.
stand-up
See, like
comedy?
I do not do it. I do not do it. I'm obsessed with watching it. Like there's no place for me to do it here. Um, but like whenever like it's like I think it's the best art form in the world. Like just sitting down, like with not going on your phone, like almost being present, just watching it, pretending like you're there is like, or dude, if you even go to a live show, it's like the best thing in the world. It's
Yeah,
like
I do enjoy
I've
comedy
never
too.
had more fun. Dude, you kind of live in a freaking great place for it.
I know.
But I'd say that is the thing that like fills my cup up the most and like makes me feel like I'm me because I'm just having fun. I'm not like thinking of anything seriously. I feel like I'm there. I'm watching it and that brings me back. That brings makes me feel like Will, you know?
Yeah, dude, I absolutely love that. Stand-up comedy. I feel the same way. It's not the first thing I go to, but I listen to it like after work when I'm just eating or something. So I think it's important for people to know what those things are. What comedians do you enjoy, by the way?
Oh yeah, dude, I can go down a rabbit hole. Obviously, Shane Gillis is the dog. He's the best. Can't go wrong there. It's kind of like he's a goat. Matt McCusker is sick. If you know that, is probably don't.
I
So I'd say
don't.
Shane Gillis, Matt McCusker, Sam Morril, David Tell is probably
Sam
my
is good.
favorite. Sam Morril's a beast, dude. Same time tomorrow was such a good special. But if you like Shane Gillis, go watch Beautiful Dogs. Great special.
Okay.
David Tell is just like he's like the most like under what is it, like he's like the most
Underrated.
underrepresented,
Yeah.
underrated. Yeah, that's the word. Like he's just been doing it since the 80s. He has a special from the 80s on HBO. You should go watch it. Um, those are my favorite. I'd say those are like my top four
I
right now, as
absolutely
of
love
right
that.
now.
Okay. I would also recommend Tom Segura. I know he's kind of an obvious
Yeah,
one, but dude, that guy is so funny.
yeah.
Um, I like those recommendations though. The comedy dude, that's definitely a freaking good one. What do you we've covered a lot of really good topics, dude. Tell me more about like looking forward now. Like what are you looking forward to now in your sales career? Like what's next for you? Are you looking at
Mhm.
the SDS at the AE route? Like are you because you've been an SDR for a bit, like what's next for you?
Yeah, I mean, 8 year out's definitely there. Dude, I'm like having like a midlife crisis about this because like
Tell me
I'm
more,
already
man. What's
going
going
down the
on?
eight. Yeah. I'm already going down the 8 year route. I've been already going down it. Like I was supposed to get promoted at my last company. I'm like, oh wait, I really love what Chantify does. I want to be a part of this and help grow something, right? And so
Mhm.
now I'm back on the AE route where I'm going to be promoted I feel like next few months, it's not really like set in stone, nor am I in a rush to do it. But it's like I'm almost like having this midlife crisis of like, I love outbound. I love
Okay.
every part of it, right? But it's like, how can I help other people do that really well while also doing that myself, right?
Mm.
And so I'm coming into like a collision with my own like sense of self. It's like, do I
Hmm.
want to be an SDR manager? Do I want to be an SDR leader? Or
Hmm.
do I want to just kill it as an AE and then come back to it or just continue being an AE? It's like, so as of right now, what's next for me is being an AE and learning that and been going through all the way throughout the funnel. But it is, I would be lying if I say it wasn't enticing to lead a team of people doing what I love to do every day.
Got it. So it sounds like you're conflicted between, hey, do I go and be an SDR manager or do I go become an AE?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, but being an AE would only make me a better SDR manager if I went back to it. And so in my head, it's like the most obvious. It's like an obvious choice because it's like whether or not like you can always go back and be an SDR manager. And there's a lot of SDR leaders in the tech space. I listened to a podcast with her name's Petra Somerville. She's the VP of sales development at a company called Datadog.
Yep.
And she says people come to advice with her to this all the time. But she always advises people to go to the AE route because the SDR leader route can sometimes pigeonhole you, whereas the AE route, you can keep owning the full sales cycle, whether as a manager or leader, but you can always go back to owning that first initial stage one of the opportunity and the development of it. And so
Yeah.
I think thinking of that, I'm like, okay, logically speaking, I should go AE.
Emotionally, where do you want to go?
Ah, dude, emotionally, I want to go to Costa Rica right now, man. But I think regardless of it, like I'll still be like, I don't know, like I haven't been an AE, right? It's like
Yeah.
I could wait, like, hey, I would really love doing this, but like I've never gone down the whole funnel, right?
Yeah.
Like a lot of people are like, oh, like you can't talk about sales. You post on LinkedIn. I'm like, dude, I don't know jack about selling. Obviously, I say that all the time. All I know how to do is book a great meeting. I want to be great at sales. And so I think that's the most obvious conclusion. So I think making my mind up, coordinate your own podcast and go AE.
Dude. It sounds like the way you made that decision though was taking the time to go, okay, like what's going to help me in the next 3, 5 years, and then thinking about it from that
Mhm.
perspective.
Precisely. How
Yeah.
did you determine where you wanted to be and like what made you stick as an AE?
Yeah, man. You know what I do for decisions? I try to think long. Like, this can be very like I'll say, like I try to think longer term and go, okay, like what are in 3 to 5 years, like where do I want to be as a person, but also my career. And then I separate it out by this actually comes from Alex Hormozy and I stole it, but essentially like what are the skills I have to build to become that person, and then what kind of character traits do I need to build, and what's gonna be the vehicle with which I move forward to go and do that. So just like
Mm,
similar to what you were saying, like I'm not a Sprout employee. I'm an employee of myself. I happen to choose to work at Sprout because it's going to help me build certain skills and get certain monetary resources so then I can grow and do the next thing in 3 to 5 years from now. I'm doing this podcast because I know that then I'll be able to grow a certain skill, making better content. I'll learn a lot from people like yourself and just I'll make really good relationships like what we're doing now. And that will then help me in the next thing. So it's about thinking
mm,
what's 3 to 5 years down the line while also keep my eye on what's potentially 10 years down the line. That's how I make those decisions in terms of, again, what skills do I need to build and then who do I need to become. If I'm going to do 50 of these episodes, right, I'm going to have to work on my consistency and really just deal with parts of episodes where I feel like I didn't do really well and deal with self criticism and things like that. I'm already expecting it. I already know that when I get
mm.
off this episode, there'll be some things I love that I did, and there'll be some things I'm like, oh, I didn't do a good job there as a host. I need to improve. I'm already expecting that. And so just working through that, right? Like working through that, I already know it's going to happen. So that's why I chose to even go into this in the first place, because I know I'm going to deal with that. And I'll develop the character trait of someone that can be consistent because I'll just keep showing up no matter what. It's the same with cold calls or anything else.
Mm,
So
mm,
that's how I
mm,
evaluate decisions. So who's it going to,
mm,
who do I need to be and what skills I need to have in the next 3 to 5 years?
mm. I
Yeah.
think you absolutely smashed it. I think you've done a great job. So definitely don't be critical on yourself.
Thank you, dude.
Um,
I'm just learning, but how do you make I'll put it on you too, because like I think about winning the inner game in sales is a lot about making good decisions. Like, how do you make decisions like that? What do you think about?
In terms of where I want to be in the
Yeah,
future.
where you want to be in the future, or maybe it's just like
Mm.
what you choose to focus on in your day to day too. Like, how do you make decisions on what's important to you, what you're going to focus on?
Gosh, I do not do that well. Yeah, my biggest focus has just been like, how can I break into the best quality accounts as fast as possible? That's like my day to day. I'm like, oh, how can I do this? How can I keep tabs of this? But like, dude, I need to focus more on my own self, like career development. Like, I need to do that. I know you're a fan of the weekendpclub.io. I purchased that. So
Oh, dude, it's good.
I'm trying to do that more. Like, if I have time, it's just like, you have time, you just have to put it away for it. Like sometimes at 10 p.m. I'm just like bored because or not because I just put my kid to sleep or something. I'm like, okay, I could technically do like I could watch some Chris Orlov right now, right? But then I also could
You're just tired,
listen to a
yeah.
podcast and go to bed. And so it's hard. Like that's the most frustrating aspect. And so like my focus has been solely around like how can I do my job the best as possible and how can I up my conversion rates to tee up my AE and then start tee him up to the point where he doesn't have time to even take a discovery call so I can take discovery calls and get better at going into my next leg, going into an AE spot. I'd say that has been like my number one driving compass. Or I guess that's where the compass points for me at the moment. And I've kind of just been all in on that.
Yeah, I like the focus. You really focus on that one thing of how can I build a skill to become an AE, right? And then all
Mhm.
decisions filter through that.
Yeah.
Um, dude, I really like that. What let's wrap up the conversation on this. Tell me more. It's gonna be kind of fun. Tell me more about the taco and hot dog suit, man. Like, where did that stuff
Yeah.
come from? And it's
hmm
become kind of a thing for you. Like, where?
hmm
Yeah, walk us through that.
Okay, so the Oreo actually I should have I should probably get my wife on a guest spot right now, but so my wife's part of a mom's group and someone was just selling like a cheap hot dog costume for like $10. And it was around October time because that's when I started as an SDR in 2022. She's like, hey, do you want this hot dog suit? It's only like $10. And I was like, yeah, sure, I guess. And then I got it and I never even wore it that year. Like I had it in the office and I let my VP of sales and built got some brownie points to them. And I let him wear it going trick-or-treating with his two daughters. So this whole time, like for over a year, I never wore it. Just sitting around, it's in a box near my desk, and I just had it sitting around. And then one day, like there was just one account I just really wanted to break into. And I spent so much time researching it. Like I knew who they sold to, like problems of the people they sold to, as well as the problems of them selling to those people.
Mhm.
Like I knew every breakdown of their product line, like how they compared to each competitor's product. I even like went deep into the Reddit rabbit hole to get all that information too. It just wasn't like I spent so much time writing these emails and just getting them across, but like it didn't capture the attention to actually look at my email, which is
Yeah.
frustrating because it's like you don't realize how many emails are in a CMO's inbox, right? And so I finally just got frustrated. I just like was just looking around, like spacing out. Like I just saw the hot dog suit, and I was just like, what if I just made like a stupid dad joke right now and just wore that hot dog suit? And then so I just, yeah, what do I lose? Worst case scenario, they don't see it anyways, right? So I just threw it
Yeah.
on. Basically, it's like, hey, like I spent all this time doing this. Really relish if you took the opportunity, like take a like look at it, like or I'll be frank, I really relish if you took the chance to look at it. And then boom, like within like 15, 20 minutes, like I had the meeting on the board just because it captured the attention. And so the hot dog to me, that's just like the origin of it, blah, blah, blah. The hot dog, the taco, the banana, or whatever, dude. It's all just like having fun with it, right? It's like an
Yeah.
ode or like testament to like, hey, you should not be boring. You should just like keep having fun with it no matter what. Because if you don't, like you'll be like, trapped essentially in just being that like one boring email, right? For example,
Dude.
yeah, like I've called prospects and they've been like, and they'll be like, I really liked your follow-up email because it's just me in a taco suit. It's like, hey, Rachel, want to talk about it or something like that. And like people get a kick out of it, right? But it's also like, sorry, I'm going on a tangent.
No, this is
A
great.
lot of
Go.
people, a lot of people will be like, oh, you're just wearing a hot dog. Oh, you're just wearing a hot dog suit for the attention. I'm just like, I don't care about that. It's just like, I think it's funny, right? I think making people laugh is like fun. Um, and like there had an SDR leader I had on a meeting like a couple months ago. And I listened to that call, and she was just like went on a huge rant about my outbound to her because I was like sending her videos of me doing push-ups, like pitching her and their SDR team. She's like, it just seems like I just love the way he does. It's like seems like something he would do. Like if anyone else sent me that, I think they're like weird. I think I would just like would block them. But like since it's Will doing it, just feels like that's him. And so I
Yeah,
feel like that's like authentically sticking to what I like to do, what I have fun doing, and that's why I have that. I have the hot dog.
dude. I like how again it all comes back to just being yourself and it was very natural. Let's I wasn't gonna do this because it's not the focus of the podcast, but now I'm curious. I think people listening will be curious too. What is your account
Mm,
strategy? Like, can you
okay.
walk us through
Mm,
the account strategy? Because now I'm curious. I'm just a student of
okay.
sales, so let's do it.
So you're an AE. How
Yes.
many accounts do you have? Would
I
you
was
say?
given about 500, and I'd say of those 500, there's probably a top 40 that are like tier one, and then there's
Okay.
probably another, I don't know, let's call it 60 that are tier B,
Okay.
and
Okay.
then
Let's say they're not okay, because tier one, tier two, tier B are like all based off of like technographic, firmographic information typically
yeah,
and like what their priorities are, right?
that's correct.
Let's say you have 40 or top 80 accounts, like within those accounts, like how do you let like what's the fastest way to inform where you spend your time within those accounts?
Yeah, for me personally, I look at what is the overall intent signal, first off in Sixth
Mm,
Sense and in Zoom Info, which I'm sure is
mm,
not a surprise to you. And then I also look at market behaviors. What are some greater market trends? So like in like retail,
mm,
like is there a shift for retail companies to start targeting Gen Z, which there is, which
mm.
means a lot more influencers. Influencers is a
Yeah.
it's a big money problem right now because it's the closest to revenue. It's a lot closer to revenue
Okay.
than an organic social is. So
Okay.
that's how I
I can
make that
understand why you're saying
decision.
that for Sprout.
Yeah,
In my opinion, this is my humble opinion. I don't think intent is like it's worth something like 20% of the time, right?
that's fair.
In my humble opinion, what's up? Oh, that's my water. My humble opinion, the fastest way to understand if an account should be prioritized or deprioritized before you spend all that time emailing people, LinkedIn people, calling like obviously calling people, but is like to actually have conversations, right? Obviously you want to call them. And so if you have like 40 different accounts, it's like that's a lot of different accounts in your patch. It's like I can't like spend my time well on all of these accounts. And so it's like, how do I prioritize these accounts? And so what you can do and how like what my account strategy looks like is like I'll realistically as an SDR go after like 6 to 7, maybe 8 in a week. And my whole purpose is that is like, hey, based off of what we do, is this is it a priority for them? Are they looking for ways to increase the efficiency of their go-to-market or outbound, right? Am I
Hmm.
looking for a pain? Are they using a competitor? Do they just sign on a competitor? If they did, I don't want to waste my time emailing people and digging through this account and prospecting into them. And so I will let the conversations I have within that account inform which accounts I spend my time on, right? So
Got it.
that being said, the way I do that is I'll have these accounts here. I will make a very strategic lead list and go through that lead list. Uh, I do have another method with that, but I don't want to derail and get too much of a tangent. I'll make that lead list of people I think I can learn something from or have a meeting with that will progress the sales cycle. A lot of people book meetings that aren't even relevant, where you could have just done discovery with them on the phone. And so after I make that lead list, my account strategy is I'll connect with everyone and I'll check my connection requests on LinkedIn every day. If they accept my connection request, I'm sending them a personalized video or a personalized voice note. And I check every day for that and I'll throw them into a skeleton outreach sequence that just says, here's 5 tasks to do over like the next 12 days. It's just a reminder to do it or like send them something personalized, right? But I'll call through an account for 5 to 7 days before I even email anyone. And within those conversations, I'd say 94, 95% of the time. I can't think of an account that I didn't get into from a conversation.
Really.
Is I either DQ'd the account, figured out who the right person was and got a referral or booked the right person on. Obviously, like take this with a grain of salt. Selling to go to market means higher pickup rates,
Yeah.
than selling to IT. But if I can leverage that conversation to DQ or prioritize certain individuals, I can take the 10 people off my list immediately and not waste my time doing it. And so my account strategy is like, hey, take the so cringy to say, but take the path of least resistance, which is conversations on cold calls to determine where you shouldn't be wasting your time and where you should be spending your time. And
That's
then if
smart.
none of
Okay,
that,
I like that.
yeah, if all of that fails, I'll send like a few relevant emails out get feelers, check the open rates, and then also start calling those people and personalizing those people.
Got
That's
it.
my
And so
entire account strategy.
you're almost using email too as like an intent indicator. How much would they open it before you put a lot of time into personalized emails?
As like my last resort. Yeah.
Okay, I see a lot more people doing this, and I find it interesting. So do you almost send emails that are somewhat well researched, but not super well researched, just to see if they open it, if it's relevant?
Only after like a week of hitting them. Yeah. I don't like, because it's like, why do that? Why even send them an email or put it together if you can just call them and just have that conversation and DQ or prioritize, you know?
Interesting. And so
Because
when you
like,
call them, do you have any research, or do you go off a blank script?
yeah, well, see, with Shopify, we essentially help companies tap into your first party data to tap into your customer advocates when they move to new companies, right?
Mhm.
Based off of that, if you think about that framework, the two things that really indicate, or three things that indicate a company that's really good is like, for example, with Sprout. You guys have a 4.4 in G2, you have great logos on your site like Rackspace and Eventbrite. Um, Also, you have great ratings on RepView with like product market fit. If I have those three indicators, I usually only do the first two on a call. Then that's the research I lead with because it's like, hey, I did my homework. Obviously, you wouldn't be working for a company that didn't have these two things, or else you'd be kind of wasting your time. Like, this is why I think it could be relevant to you.
Mhm. No shit. Interesting.
But again, the research I'm gonna have to do is a lot different. At my last company, we're selling technographic data. If I was selling the cybersecurity, I knew every one of their competitors, who they competed with, and what their I had a very good hypothesis of what their ICP looked like, which takes a lot of research. But the amount of research I'm doing now is a lot less.
That's interesting, which and then helps the volume. Yeah, because I'm still trying to figure this out because I'm probably hitting like 6 accounts a week. I'm doing a decent
Hmm.
amount of research when I'm
Yeah.
emailing. I email first and then I call. And I
Hmm.
see what you're saying. That's interesting.
Yeah,
What
try
led you
switching it
to this
up.
approach? Did you
Okay,
think of
what
this?
led
Did you
me?
get yeah.
Yeah, so what led me to the approach was my like, first couple weeks at Champify. I spent so much time like doing personalized emails, so much time like for so much time like putting together sequences and sequencing people.
Mhm.
First of all, my domain got blocked.
Really?
Yeah, which wasn't good because I had like 300 people sequenced, but they were
Oh,
like
it's
like lavender scored emails, blah blah blah. But and then I'm like, dude, this sucks. I hate this. I'm spending so much time doing this. I'm not getting anywhere from it. Like 4 or 5 of the accounts I went after in that first week were we're using a competitor. So I was just wasting my time like following up on these emails to no avail, right? Because it's like, why would you follow up on an opportunity when there is no opportunity? And so I just got
yeah.
tired of it. I'm like, and I looked at my commission workbook, which is where an Excel sheet where I keep track of all the meetings I booked and what account, when, what the outcome of it was. From there, I was like, what are the source? Like, where am I even getting all these meetings from? I was only calling for like 2 hours a day, which was like so against anything I've ever preached, right? Just because I thought like, hey, I'm starting a new company, I'm gonna get so good at emailing, it's not even funny. And then I looked at it, I was like, for example, in the first month, I booked like 18 demos from cold calls, 16 from LinkedIn, and 4 from email. And I was sequencing people this whole time. The 4 meetings I booked via email were referrals I got on the phone and CC'd that person on. And I looked at that. I'm like, dude, what the hell am I doing? Like oh, it's a bad word. What the heck am I
It doesn't
doing?
matter. You can swear.
Um, I'm saying I'm spending so much time doing something that doesn't like yield anything to me. I'm like, I literally found a dead horse and just started punching it. And that's like what email was to me, right? And so I just switched it up. I'm like, I'm not gonna like I'm leading with the wrong thing here, right? And so I was like, why not just stick to kind of what we spoke earlier? Like, what do I love doing? What makes me the most money? Which logistically, like analytically speaking, if you look at the breakdown, I wasn't making anything from cold emails, which either means, hey, my cold emails suck, or people weren't seeing it, maybe delivery was wrong, but I just love cold calling. And then what can I be the best at in terms of email, LinkedIn, and call? So I prioritize everything from LinkedIn. Yes, I think you should pitch that to people if you do it right, and cold calling.
God, it's wild to the volume of meetings that you get is just wild, dude. Like,
Yeah,
yeah.
I'm not, the volume is definitely a lot lower now because I'm more targeted. Like I don't even know how many I could check, but if you want me to do that right now. But like I'd say I'm booking like this week I'm at 11. Like last week was probably like 7, but they're all like a lot of them are converting to opportunities. And because that's like after I get the hey, this is really interesting, we want to look into this, I'll take more time to do more discovery. I'm like, hey, is this even a problem for you guys? Like, let me highlight the gaps of that problem so that I can tee up my AE better. Whereas beforehand, if they say this is interesting, I'm like, okay, how does next week work? And just book them on it. Right. Instead, I'm like, hey, is this something you can even like actively look at? Are you actively looking at ways to increase the efficiency of your pipe gen? Because maybe what your team reps not hitting your number, or like what is the priority that's like driving that? And so I guess like your conversion rate does kind of go higher as you're training to become an AE because you're start asking the right questions. And that's something I'm like really doubling down on right now. So
Well,
that's
yeah,
hence like
dude.
I'd rather have less meetings, high conversion rate than more meetings, mid conversion rate, you know?
Dude, it's smart. It's really smart. I like the way you're approaching it. You're making me think about my process now and how what I'm doing. Dude, blow my mind here. Blow my mind. Um, what is a because I'm still a host. I need to do that. What is the one lesson that you would leave people with wrapping up this wonderful podcast that's turned into you teaching me, which has been amazing. What is one piece of advice that you would give people who want to master their inner game in sales as a sales rep?
Hmm. Say it's if it's not fun, you're done, dude.
If it's not
You're
fun, you're
not,
done. Dude, that is
yeah,
amazing.
yeah.
If it's
I'd
not
say that
fun, you're
that's the number
done.
one. Yeah.
Wow. Wow. Dude, amazing. Amazing.
It's poetic.
Well, folks, you heard it here first. If it's not fun, you're done. Thank you guys for watching. This is an amazing episode. It's gone twisted and turned and done everything that I was not expecting in the best ways. So thank you, Will, for making this an original episode. Dude, you're a good soul, and I've grown to really appreciate you. So thank you, my man. And for everyone watching,
Dude,
thank you.
thank you for having me, man. I'll
Yeah,
talk
it's
to
been
you. I'll
solid.
talk to you sometime soon.